Hello there. If you're getting this message, it's because you are a head of a patriot group, or somebody in my group sees you as a true warrior, somebody that loves the Constitution, somebody that loves God, and realizes that if there are to be changes made in our country, in our county, in our states, it's going to have to be we, the people, that do it. So I'm going to cut right to the chase for some of you who don't need the lecture as to why we need to get involved. So I'm going to let you know that there's going to be a meeting on Saturday, March 2nd at 10 a.m. It'll be a digital meeting. So I will be sending you a link. We're going to try to keep it to around an hour, and that's if people will also watch the links that we attach to this video to kind of get an understanding of what tactical civics are. It might be a little bit longer depending on the questions and answers, but we need as many people to know about this as possible. This might not be something you get involved with. Like I said, a lot of you are patriot leaders already and have a lot of things going on, but we need people to be aware of it, because in order for us to do what we need to do, there has to be a pretty good support from the community. So let me explain what tactical civics is. Some of you I've already talked to, some of you I will be talking to, but for those of you who are unaware, tactical civics is a group that's been around for about 15 years now. They're teaching people how to set up grand juries in their counties. Now, grand juries is not the same as a jury trial. I think most of us think of that when we hear grand jury. Our system's been kind of twisted and turned into legal positivism instead of nature's law, like it was intended by our forefathers and our Father in heaven. But we'll get into that a little bit later for those that need the further explanation. Way back when, our forefathers wanted us, we the people, to be able to oversee. So the Constitution itself is not giving the government power. In fact, it's limiting its power. It has 17 enumerated powers in which the government can oversee. If it's not in the Constitution, they have no right governing it, which of course we know that that's all your three-letter agencies and all that are being ran through the federal system, which they really don't have a right to do. But we have been kind of asleep at the wheel and have allowed some of these things to happen because we hadn't been taught, we didn't know better, or we just weren't paying attention. But the Constitution protects nature's law. Now, what is nature's law? It is the laws of God. Honestly, it was in the first paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. Okay, so I'll get into that a little bit more again later. But what tactical civics is doing is the grand juries, and we the people that we're supposed to oversee, are brought in when there's anything to be investigated by we the people. So for instance, okay, let's say that there's voting fraud or people are accusing voting fraud. A grand jury can be requested. It can either be requested by a good constitutional sheriff or by a general assembly. And there is a group of members that would be gathered in a grand jury to actually provide that investigation. Okay, the legislative branch, all three branches of government have no ability to be able to stop them on any of their investigation. They have full subpoena power. They can look through emails. They can look through, ledgers of what the cities are spending, anything that they need to in order to provide and perform that investigation. They have full power to do so. It just has to be registered with the county that a grand jury is investigating and what they're investigating. Okay, so why is this important? Well, back in the days, I'd say even before Lincoln, when these grand juries were brought in on a regular basis, as they should have been, it kept elected officials honest. You didn't have people embezzling money or being bribed or things like that as often, because the grand juries not only had their own militias, but they had their own executioner, which it sounds a little brutal, but they had an executioner that was hooded and they would take care of business. If you got caught breaking the Constitution, you could either lose your elected official position, go to jail, depending on what the circumstances, or if you committed treason, your head got chopped off or you got hung. I mean, the people didn't mess around back then because we, the people, were always supposed to oversee. The lie is right now that we have a democracy. How many times have you heard that? Oh, it's a threat to our democracy. Even Tucker Carlson, who I love, is always saying, our democracy, our democracy. We don't have democracy. We have democracy as far as voting, where we take the majority rule. And then we elect our officials in. A democracy means that you elect your officials in by majority rule and then they do what they want. That's not how we're set up. We are a constitutional republic. In fact, the only guarantee in the Constitution that we have is that we are to always have a constitutional republic form of government. Constitutional republic is you vote in your elected official by majority rule, but then the people oversee. They oversee the actions of all elected officials and all political positions and yada yada, which we haven't been trained and we've been asleep at the wheel. Same with our parents and our grandparents, and it goes back quite a ways. I think this was intentional. If any of you guys understand the Communist Manifesto, this was all planned out. Okay, but where we are today is it's time for us to clean house. Okay, so Tactical Civics, they have members in every single state. They're teaching people to put together grand juries to go investigate anything that's unconstitutional that needs to be investigated. The goal is to roll out one grand jury per state at the same time or similar time so that we can support each other. Okay, you have to have 0.5% of the population in support of the grand jury, which is why we need you to spread this message, even if you're not part of the grand jury or don't have time or don't want to be part of the grand jury. We have to have the support of the people in order to establish a grand jury on any subject, on any matter, on anything that needs to be investigated. So again, we're asking you to at least understand it so that you can support it and maybe push other people that do want to be involved with this into the direction of Tactical Civics. Okay, so that is what we're doing. Meetings on March 2nd. We really want you guys to understand this. You can spread it to your people. Now, let's get into more of the why. And I'm speaking directly to Christians. Okay, because I want you to understand that this is not just something, oh, that would be a good idea to help fight for our freedoms. We are told, we are commanded in Scripture to fight for the laws of God. I live in Utah, so there's quite a bit of LDS people here. So I'm gonna kind of pull a little bit of their doctrine and their beliefs into it, because it's kind of disturbing to me that most people don't understand the basic fundamentals of what we are supposed to be doing at this time per direction of our Father in heaven. And so I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Okay, so let me go back to nature's law. What is nature's law? In the first paragraph of the Declaration of Independence, it says God is nature, nature's God. Nature's law are all things absolute. The laws of science, the laws of physics, the laws of motion, the laws of gravity, okay? And you do not have to be a Christian. You do not have to, it doesn't matter if you're Hindu or Buddhist or whatnot. We all can agree that the laws of nature exist. Anybody over 2 years old knows that if you walk off of a tall building, gravity is going to pull you to the ground. Anybody can see that I can get up and walk across the room, or I can get in a car, and that follows the laws of motion. Those things that we can do physically were not given to us because any man said, hey, you can walk or you can drive a car. Those things were given to us by our Creator. However you believe we were created, those laws of nature exist. So by the laws of nature, in the Declaration of Independence, they declared their rights. Their inalienable rights came from their Creator. And no man have a right to govern those nature's laws. I'll get to natural in a minute, because it was given to us by our Creator. So even our founding fathers, they never intended for people to be lawmakers. That falls into something different I'll get into. How do you make law if it's already there? They're supposed to be making provisions and statutes. Let me give you an example. Our driver's license technically are unconstitutional. And some of you may have run into state nationalists, or what do they call themselves, sovereign citizens, that have realized, oh, wait a second, our driver's licenses are unconstitutional. They can't force that on us. Well, I don't recommend anybody walk away from and sign out of the system. And the reason why is because these things that were brought in unconstitutionally, the birth certificates, the driver's license, the marriage licenses, they are all done unconstitutionally. Instead of signing out of the system, we just stand up for the Constitution as God's told us to do. Because any contract or agreement or anything we were forced into, a baby doesn't decide if they have a birth certificate. They have no choice in that. That was done unconstitutionally, so it's null and void. We don't need to sign out. In fact, those that are signing out are saying, hey, I was part of this unconstitutional contract and now I want out of it. That's kind of a bad idea, because it never should be enforced to begin with, and we just need to learn how to stand up for that, okay? So those are the laws of nature where the legislators are supposed to put provisions in statute. If you have the laws of motion and you physically can drive and own a vehicle, then the legislators can say, okay, we have to put provisions on that, because if not, everybody's going to be driving into each other. So there's speed limits, and you have to pass a driver's course, and you have to, prove that you can operate a vehicle safely in order to be able to drive. But driver's license say that it's illegal to drive unless you have our license, which is unconstitutional. God gave us the laws of motion. Therefore, man can't say you can't have it unless you do what we say. They can just put provisions on there, because our physical capability, we can do anything you want. That's the whole purpose of God's intent for our lives, was to have agency. You can do anything you physically want, so long as it doesn't infringe on somebody else's rights. Okay, so let me go back again to why God commanded us. So most people are unaware that the Constitution and the laws of nature actually mimic the reign of the judges in the Bible. And for those of you who are LDS, this also happened in the Book of Mormon under Moroni. So in the Bible, under the reign of judges, Samuel was the prophet at the time, and the people lived in peace for 400 and some odd years under the reign of the judges. Now, the reign of the judges, they did not rule. The people ruled. Under nature's law, they all followed nature's law, or God's law, where they physically could do what they wanted, but they didn't violate other people's rights. And so if there was a contention, if a neighbor, that had property started growing a garden on somebody else's property, they could bring that into the judges and say, hey, we have an issue here. And they were just meant to be peacekeepers to let them work it out. Now, if you had somebody that, say, committed a murder, of course, they don't want to admit to that because the punishment was prison or death. Then the reign of the judges were required to gather all the facts and the findings and the witnesses. And then it was really interesting because they would have a panel of women. So the men would find the facts because they are the law of the priesthood, and the women are the equity or the heart of the priesthood. And so they would determine judgment, which I think is really interesting. We don't always hear about the women's roles in the Bible. But these people lived this way for 408 years. And then they said, you know what, this is too hard. Like, we don't want to manage ourselves. We want a king to rule over us like all other nations. And Samuel's like, no, that's a bad idea. This is God's law. And so he went to God and said, hey, they're not backing off. They want a king. And God told them, they're not rejecting you. They're rejecting me. Give them what they want. In fact, God loved them so much that he gave them Saul, who was a righteous man at the time, to be their king. But of course, a lot of people that get into power, the pride gets to them and they become tyrannical at some point, which is exactly what happened. In the Book of Mormon, the same thing happened. I think their reign of judges was only 200 and something years. They came to Moroni and they said, nah, this is too hard. Give us a king. We just want a king. This is too hard. Samuel convinced them otherwise. This is going against the laws of God. Are you sure you want to do that? And they didn't. And they prospered for a while until, of course, generations later, they started doing stupid things. That's just scriptures in general. We go, where people are good, then they're evil. Good and evil. That's how it is. Which Jesus referred to our day as like the days of Noah. And there were a lot of things going on in the days of Noah. But what was interesting when I studied Noah, I have friends that are Hebrew scholars and Greek scholars have really dug into the actual understanding the original text in the Bible of the days of Noah. And it was interesting that I always just thought everybody was evil because it just said, oh, everybody was bad except for Noah's family. And so God wiped everybody out. Well, what was interesting that there was a lot of people worshiping God and thinking that, going to church and worshiping God. But all the people that were worshiping idols and sexual sin and doing all kinds of crazy stuff, sacrifice, whatever, they didn't want to fight with them. They're like, oh man, they're nasty. They're mean. They're going to punish me. They're going to hurt me if I stand up to them. So I'll tell you what, you guys do your crap over here. We'll still worship God over here. God deemed them all evil because they refused to stand up for his laws. Now, let's jump up forward to the LDS Church, where I think it's the 12th article of faith that says that we follow the laws of the land. And I've actually had people quote that to me as in my fight for the Constitution and working with other groups. They're like, well, I don't understand why you guys are always complaining about this or that. We're just supposed to follow the laws of the land. We really can't do anything about it. Where did that come from? I'm going to tell you. That article of faith came from Romans 13. And anybody that hasn't read that chapter, go read it again, please, because God tells us what laws are. There are no laws above God's laws. And so we are only to follow the laws of the land if they be righteous. If they're telling us to do unrighteous things, we can't just go, oh, sorry, well, that was the president involved, or that was the mayor, or whatever. I didn't have a choice in it. I just followed the laws of the land. That doesn't work. If that were the case, then why did we fight against Hitler? He was in charge at the time. Oh, well, sorry, you got a bad leader. Good luck with that. Like, it makes no sense. We are required to fight against the evils. So again, going back to like people that have abortion, people that, this gender confusion crap, whatever, we are to be kind and loving to people. But as far as our policies go in our counties and our states, we are to fight for the laws of God. It blows me away. I'm friends with pastors and preachers and people that are, claim to be men of God, and yet they follow the Democratic policies where abortion's okay. It's a woman's right. No, it's not by the laws of nature, where gender affirming care is okay because it's their right. They don't understand what rights are. So it is our responsibility to learn these things. Okay. Joseph Smith, for those of you who are LDS, in D&C 58, if you haven't read that for a while, please go read that. He tells us that we follow the Constitution, that Constitution was brought in by God, that this land was ordained and sanctioned by God. George Washington, a lot of people don't understand that George Washington was actually visited by an angel the night before the Battle of Valley Forge. In fact, he was getting ready to surrender because their army they lost over 2,000 soldiers from starvation in the cold. They didn't have equipment. They didn't have clothes even. He was going to have to surrender, and he was visited by an angel that told him that God would fight his battles if they continued. And there was many accounts of other people witnessing George Washington going out into a grove of trees somewhere, and the whole grove of trees lighting up, and then he'd come back and giving them direction. Like, anybody that doesn't understand that George Washington was a man of God they've either been swallowed up by the lies of, certain agendas, or they're really not paying attention. Also, for those of you who are LDS, 98 talks about the Constitution, and my favorite is D&C 123, where Joseph Smith tells the people what to do when their governments or their leaders go tyrannical. Now, I realize he was in Carthage jail and he was talking to the people, this is what we need to do at this point, but Ezra Taft Benson, and I believe it was David O. McKay, also pointed out that direction was for the last days, knowing that the Constitution was going to be hanging on a thread, like Joseph Smith had told us. And if it were to be saved, it's not a guarantee. If it were to be saved, it would be the elders that would gather the honest in heart to fight for the Constitution. And I'm trying to be that honest in heart and listening to the direction and the command of our Father in heaven, who has told us to protect the Constitution because it protects the ability for us to follow his laws. So that's kind of I kind of went on a little bit, but I'm hoping that people, especially here in Utah, because that's where we are focused on, will understand not only the why, but the how by this meeting that we're going to be doing and teaching people how to stand up for our constitutional rights. But please pray about this. For those of you who are Christians, please pray about this. I totally love and respect people that go to school board meetings and are going to legislation meetings that we haven't done before. We're like, oh, there's a problem here. But what I have found is the lack of what to do about it. So many people know there's a problem, but what do we do about it? Defending Utah is one of my favorite groups, and they've been teaching people for some time how to collect committees of safety, how to gather committees of safety and file Declaration of Rights. This actually goes alongside, for those of you who are defending Utah members, it goes alongside. If you file a Declaration of Rights, which basically just means this is our constitutional right, mayor, governor, whoever it is that you're sending it to, you're violating our rights. We're letting you know we're declaring our constitutional rights. That's such a wonderful action, such a great idea. The scholars and the constitutional scholars and the attorneys that I work with love that idea. And we've helped with some of those. But the problem is sometimes you're going to get the elected official that's going to go, oh my gosh, there's a lot of people paying attention to this. I better do something about it. And some people are like, whatever, I don't care. who cares? It's not a voting year, or there's nothing you can do. The voting system's rigged, whatever. They just don't change it because it's too much work. So this brings in the tactical civics, brings in the teeth. So those that are filing declarations saying, hey, we just declared our rights and you ignored us. Now it's time for a grand jury to actually take action. And you know, when there's elected officials or people that are actually reprimanded or something actually happens, you better believe the rest of the elected officials are going to pay attention and go, oh, wait, we can't just do what we want anymore. Like, we don't have free reign to just do what we want. It's going to change everything. And here's one more thing that I want to point out, because I've had people say to me, if you're a Morgan Philpott follower, I got beef with that. I've got a video I'm sending to him. He's wonderful with scripture. He's great with understanding a lot of things. But in his mind, we're too late. I've been in politics. All politicians are bad. It's all corrupt. We're just going to go get ready for the second coming. Go get right with God. Go grow your garden. Go get your survival stuff. Sorry, but God didn't tell us, go fight for the Constitution and you'll win. He just said, go fight for the Constitution. Go follow my laws. Go protect my laws. It doesn't matter what the outcome is. So my question to those of you who have that mindset, how do you get right with God when you refuse to protect the laws that he gave us, that he told us to protect? It makes no sense. So those of you that says, oh, there's nothing we can do, or I'm not political, guess what? The Constitution isn't a political document. It is literally our protection to follow the laws of God. And if anybody has any questions on this, I'm happy to talk to them about it. But at least it gives you an idea of what our fight is, and that we are trying to follow God's laws. We're trying to follow the directions of prophets and scriptures, and, you know, Alma 8, 2 Nephi 9, secret combinations in our day. We are supposed to be watching for these and fight against them. So thank you for listening. Sorry, I got a little long-winded. I will send out the links. If you don't get a link and you want to be on that digital meeting, please let me know. I will send it to you. I hope you have a wonderful day. God bless you all. God bless our country. And let's keep continuing with our efforts to follow God's laws. Have a great day.